Welcome to 3 Count Commentaries. Today is a TNA pay-per-view, and guess what? I actually have nothing but good things to say. Even the matches I didn't care about were still not bad. Today, we're going to be reviewing TNA Rebellion from April the 27th, 2024. Later in the show, we're going to be discussing TNA being considered a third-tier promotion, which is what Dave Meltzer is suggesting. Also going to discuss Joe Hendry's comments about the Randy Orton match at WrestleMania, and the fact that this show actually sold out, despite the fact that so many people thought that the Joe Hendry defeat at WrestleMania was actually going to harm TNA in any way. So we're going to start with the World Championship match. This was actually one of the weaker matches on the card. Joe Hendry defeated Frankie Kazarian and Ethan Page to retain the TNA World Championship. The match was just okay. These were 3 guys who probably needed some spice with them in order to make the match more interesting. The big finish came from Joe Hendry giving the old fireman slam, what they call the attitude adjustment, on Frankie Kazarian off the ring apron through a table. This was immediately followed up with Ethan Page attacking Joe Hendry with the belt. That being countered, then giving him a twist of fate on the belt, only to get a 2 count. Afterwards, Joe Hendry fired up, hit the fall-away slam, followed up by the standing ovation choke slam, 1, 2, 3. Joe Hendry wins the match. It was actually not bad, but it was also not great. The energy from the crowd was down due to the previous match, but I genuinely think this match was just okay. It was just okay. After the match, Joe Hendry was attacked and laid out by Trick Williams of NXT. I was very surprised to see this, but actually kind of happy to see this. Trick Williams is gone official. He's gone full heel in TNA. You know, he even crotch chopped to the audience. They were stunned, not really sure how to respond at first, and they started chanting, "Whoop that Trick." This was, of course, a receipt from Joe Hendry's sojourn to NXT on Tuesday, where he basically said that Trick Williams was a fan, and he was watching WrestleMania while Joe Hendry was at WrestleMania. So it was a pretty good setup here. And Trick Williams is one of the bigger stars they have sent to NXT has sent to TNA in a while. I think the 2 biggest stars were clearly him and Obafemi. So Trick Williams is going to be running a program with Joe Hendry. This ought to be fun. You know, Trick Williams, he needs the experience. So does pretty much everybody who comes to NXT. And guess what else? TNA needs the talent. You know, NXT supplementing TNA's roster has been a godsend for both programs, if we're being honest. TNA is very weak on talent, but you get to bolster, especially their women's division, with NXT talent. And NXT has become sort of bottlenecked due to the fact that the main roster is overflowing with talent, and the fact that, you know, there's a new brand with Evolve, so they're trying to siphon guys out of NXT, so they're sending some of them to Evolve, and they're sending some of them to TNA, and they're trying to send some of them to the main roster, but they're also bringing in people for the main roster too. So there's a lot of motion going on, and Trick Williams is a guy that probably should go to the main roster, but if you don't have a plan for him right now, sending him to TNA is probably the right option. He gets to continue being a top guy, and he has sort of lost that spot in in NXT, due to the fact that he's lost another championship match at Stand and Deliver. So he really doesn't have any argument outside of him not being the guy who was pinned to get a rematch. So diverting him into a TNA feud is perfectly fine with me. It gives more people an opportunity to see Trick Williams. It gives Trick Williams a fresh set of eyeballs. Some of the TNA fans who might not want to watch NXT may find this guy to be very entertaining, especially if they let him do what he do. And it's going to be some fun stuff. I'm really looking forward to this. Joe Hendry, of course, faced a lot of criticism for the WrestleMania match with Randy Orton. He's done a couple of interviews since then, sort of defending the position of going out there and losing in like 3 minutes to Randy. I went and watched the match again, and it was actually not that bad. It's only bad if you look at Cage Match and you see that the match was only 3 minutes. If you actually watch it, Joe Hendry actually got quite a bit of offense in the match, and Randy Orton gave him a lot, and it was kind of a surprise RKO. So I really didn't see a problem with it. I guess these guys think that every match is supposed to be 45 minutes, but that's not necessarily how you get people over. And the point was to move Randy towards the title, and Joe Hendry was a surprise opponent who was hot dogging and lost. But he did an interview where people said that he was buried and his championship was diminished. And he says, quote, "I disagree. The offense was back and forth, whereas a squash to me, it could have been ding, 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 RKO. There you go. For me, what I was thinking about, my different title reigns are defined by different things. When Josh Alexander was TNA World Champion, it was classic match after classic match. My job as TNA Champion and what defines this reign is business and getting as many eyeballs on TNA as possible. You know who else lost quickly at WrestleMania in a similar fashion? John Cena. All of a sudden, I'm going to say, I'm too good to do that? To me, that's exactly how it should have gone. Did you know what CM Punk told me? We had a great conversation afterwards. CM Punk told me that's exactly how it should have gone. And if it had gone longer, I think it would have worked out worse for me. There is no shame in taking an RKO and losing to a legend like Randy Orton." He said this on Busted Open Radio. And I absolutely agree with that. I think the argument is really just an attempt at people to diminish what he's able to do. And I think he's smart. He's a smart guy who realizes that the platform is more important than the outcome. Nobody really is going to care that he lost in 3 minutes to Randy Orton. It's more about he was the TNA World Champion who appeared at WrestleMania and fought Randy Orton. And of course he was going to lose. So what? But this, of course, led to Dave Meltzer and many others taking pot shots at TNA. Might as well just do that here, too, before we continue with the rest of the show. So Dave Meltzer goes on Wrestling Observer newsletter and says, quote, "To the masses," because he has, his Dr. Xavier headgear on, and he can read people's minds. "TNA looks like a third-tier group, and one could argue that's what it is. The idea, some have argued, is that nobody knew Hendry, and now they do. That's not the case. It is about putting the TNA Championship on a pedestal that it can be competed for at WrestleMania. Even though the title wasn't on the line, the champion was good enough to make it to WrestleMania." He says, he walked into NXT and got a gigantic reaction, and the same happened at the Rumble, where he was eliminated quickly. But lots of stars are in the Rumble. The reaction, not just the pop, but the waving, showed that the audience all knew him going in. So the only exposure was establishing his level in the pecking order as R-Truth. Cool entrance that gets everyone up, then usually loses quickly. Truth's music may get a reaction, but nobody in theory would ever have him as the guy to carry a brand. But it does have to be a downer for the hardcore TNA fan base. But that company agreed to it, which is in a sense show how desperate they are, because no strong company would have done so. The quick win was one thing, but the second RKO after the match did leave you with the idea that this guy is on the level of or below a prelim WWE guy. Now, let's discuss this. I don't want to put too much time into it because I do want to get to the rest of the show, and I think the rest of the show is pretty good. This show sold out. Rebellion. This show sold out. 7,000 or 8,000 tickets, thereabouts. The idea that TNA is a stronger company now than it was 2 years ago. And a lot of that has to do with the rise of Joe Hendry and with Joe Hendry winning the title. Again, I say it. I was in the building for their biggest show of the year in 2024, which was in Detroit, Bound for Glory. everybody wanted Joe Hendry to win. The fact that he would later get eliminated from the Royal Rumble, so what? People get eliminated from the Royal Rumble all the time. That's not a big deal. The fact that he got beat in 3 minutes, obviously not a big deal. I think Joe Hendry himself noted that, John Cena went in there and basically got squashed by Undertaker. I think that match was like 2.5 minutes, maybe 3 or 4 minutes. Oh, you also had Bryan Danielson. Remember, he got kicked in the face. One move. He didn't even get any offense in at WrestleMania against Sheamus. Didn't really devalue him. It actually got people behind him even more. Sometimes the usual way to do things doesn't work. I think that if you had tried to have Joe Hendry go 25 minutes with Randy Orton, hit Randy Orton with all of his best moves, and then lose. Well, he looks competitive. Well, he looked competitive anyway in there with Randy. He just did it in a shorter amount of time. I just think that Meltzer sees WWE and TNA working together as some sort of threat towards AEW. Similar with the AAA stuff that they got going on here, right? And since AEW is his beloved promotion, it's a sort of bias against this. I mean, I don't remember him saying anything when the TNA World Champion, was being pinned by Kenny Omega. He didn't say anything. Oh, well, it was Rich Swann, so it didn't matter, right? And he won the belt. And then did not lose the belt back to a TNA talent. So when you look at the partnership between TNA and AEW, when Kenny Omega lost the belt, he lost the belt to Christian on an episode of Rampage. And then Christian lost the belt back into TNA. They didn't even beat Kenny Omega. So Kenny Omega went down there, beat all of their top guys, and then left. Which is a lot different. And in some cases, again, worse. Because then you had Tony Khan going down to TNA and trash talking them on their television. WWE is actually putting TNA over. Talking about the champions, letting the champions get huge pops. And they're not going to win, that's obvious. But letting them be competitive and in these competition doesn't necessarily mean that the match has to be long. I've said that already, but it needs to be said again. You can be competitive and not win. And I think the Joe Hendry-Randy Orton match was competitive without Joe Hendry winning. You can actually look at some highlights of Joe Hendry hitting moves on Randy. It's basically they went in there and did the greatest hits in 3 minutes and that was it. Came up with a creative finish and called it a day. The idea that he is some kind of R-Truth, he's just an entrance. This is what Meltzer wants people to believe when it comes to Joe Hendry, because he's not he's not going in there doing the sweaty humps. He's not going to go in there and do a bunch of gymnastics. He is a character guy. And a character performer like a Joe Hendry is not fit to be going out there doing 60-minute Broadways. It just doesn't make sense. And you have to book for the performer. Joe Hendry is over. In any other context, people would say, the guy's over, go with him. But now when it comes to Joe Hendry, we're not supposed to do that. When it was Zack Ryder, everybody, the company, they should have just gone with him. Then it was Jey Uso. Then people were kind of, squirming about it. But then it comes to Joe Hendry. Oh, no, he's just an entrance. Okay. Look, like I said, the in-ring part is the least interesting part. This is a business. Joe Hendry is increasing business for TNA. And it might not be that much, but he's increasing business for TNA. Now, the idea that TNA is a third-tier promotion, well, it's obvious. I don't see how you can even debate that TNA is a third-tier promotion, considering they don't have the money or the reach that AEW and WWE have. Even if Anthem, which I know has a substantial amount of money, they're not going to pour those kinds of resources into TNA. They're just not going to. That's a big problem because, their roster has been decimated to a sense because people have decided to leave because Scott D'Amore was fired and because Gail Kim has been removed, and there's a lot of people who were loyal to them that are now gone. And that's the problem, because the roster for TNA is, weak, let's say. But they're doing their best. They're selling their shows out. And these are not, the typical bullshit Ring of Honor sellouts of 500 people, 600 people. They did almost 10,000 people in the building. That's a big deal. And it matters. This Rebellion, it's bigger than most Dynamites. It's bigger than like 2 Dynamites. I think it's about probably in the same ballpark as what AEW's last pay-per-view did. So if you want to say that All In is in the same ballpark as WrestleMania because they did 50,000 tickets, then you have to say that, some of these TNA pay-per-views are in the same ballpark as some of these AEW pay-per-views. Isn't that the appropriate way to do things, to have an apples-to-apples comparison? But the money put into the promotion and the money made from the promotion is not nearly the same. The money that AEW makes off of their, all-ins pales in comparison to the money made at WrestleMania. And the money that AEW will make off of their pay-per-views pales in comparison to the money TNA makes from their pay-per-views. Mainly because I don't even think TNA even sells pay-per-views anymore. I think you have to buy from the TNA Plus site. So a lot of this is just Meltzer doing advanced tribalism. Let's move on from that now. The Namath Boys, Ryan and Nick, defeat the Hardy Boys, Matt and Jeff, to win the tag team championships. This was a really good match. And I'm going to tell you something that needs to be said without a shadow of a doubt. Nick Namath is ageless. I was watching him in this match, and with the exception of the environment, it could easily be 2016, 2015 again. Physically, he has not changed at all. He still goes out there, takes the same amount of bumps. He still sells tremendously. He has not slowed down a single bit when it comes to actually being able to work in the ring. He reminds me so much of Kurt Hennig, but he aged better than Kurt Hennig. This guy is 44 years old. I'm talking about Nick Namath here. All right, Randy Orton is 45. Randy Orton moves like a T100. All right, and I mean that in both ways, as in he moves like a tank and like a low-level Terminator. He's ageless, and we're going to have to give him some credit one day for being as good as he is at this age. And it's not like this guy was working some kind of rinky-dink schedule. He was working the regular WWE schedule, every Raw, every SmackDown, house shows, and he has seemingly suffered no major injuries that has allowed him to, or that has forced him to modify his style. He has not had any major injuries that has forced him to gain a ton of weight. Nothing. He looks the same. He might even be in better shape now than he was before. I mean, the guy is just next level. You got to give him some credit. He was phenomenal in this match. He was very good. Ryan is useless. Ryan blew a spot in this match. There was supposed to be a pin, and Ryan was supposed to break up the spot, but he never showed up. So Matt tripped over the referee to break up the spot, which was, I think, an accident. Obviously, Matt Hardy, he moves like a bookshelf. I mean, this has been going on for 10 years now. Matt Hardy cannot walk, can barely move. All right. And yet people love Jeff. And Jeff's starting to slow down. Jeff's been starting to slow down for the last 2 or 3 years, maybe even longer than that. But he, of course, still sets the crowd on fire, the whisper in the wind and all that stuff. They also did some really fun stuff on the Impact show, where they did the Hardy Compound stuff, which you probably saw all over the internet, as Jeff Hardy dressed like Will-O-the-Wisp, dancing to Not Like Us, a rendition of Not Like Us. Which, look, I've never been a huge fan of the Hardy Compound stuff because it's a little too silly. But they've been doing that shit for 10 years, probably over 10 years now. And it went viral this time, and people were talking about how stupid it was. But then again, it was also just the AEW fans who now feel threatened by TNA because TNA is starting to sell tickets, and people are comparing TNA and AEW, which I don't think is that fair because of, the financials of the two promotions are so different. You got to look under the hood, and under the hood, the financials of the promotions are two wildly different things. I mean, I think AEW probably spends more money on one talent than TNA spends on their entire roster. I'm pretty sure Chris Jericho makes more money than like 60 or 70% of the TNA roster. I'm just almost certain of that. Like, just Jericho. Let alone all the other people that Tony Khan is shelling tons and tons of money to. But the finish of the match was that Nick Nemeth hits the danger zone, which we used to call the zigzag. Ryan tags himself in, slid across the ring, and pinned Jeff. This led to a firestorm on the internet as Ryan Nemeth pinned Jeff Hardy, and everybody is super mad about this, which is the plan. That was what they wanted. They wanted people to be mad about that. The whole match, Ryan was just basically a nuisance. He was no physical threat. He was just out there to make sure and help Nick. That's pretty much it. And that's been the storyline with the Nemeth boys in the first place. Ryan is useless. Nick is great. As long as Ryan stays out of the way, Nick can win. And that's kind of it, which is interesting. But I also like that this is going to keep going because the Hardy Boys don't have any opponents otherwise. If the Hardy Boys were to beat them, who was you going to have next? So losing to the Nemeths just keeps this thing going, which is what you want. Next was one of the better matches of the night. Tessa Blanchard loses to Masha Slamovich via Becky Lynch's disarmor. This match was fun. This was a really fun match. Tessa Blanchard was really aggressive. I noticed something. I know I'm probably going to say this and then maybe it's wrong, but this has been my experience. The racist chants towards Tessa has stopped. The chance of she's a racist, that stuff has stopped. And I don't think if anybody else, I know the internet's never going to get over it, but the people in the building seemingly have kind of dropped the issue and basically just enjoy her performances. And she was really good here. She targeted Masha Slamovich's leg with some really unique submission holds. And she also did like a really unique run into the knee. You also had a buzzsaw DDT by Tessa Blanchard, was only 2. The big finish comes from Masha Slamovich doing a rolling Samoan drop from the top rope, followed by a running knee strike. And then while Tessa Blanchard kicked out, Masha Slamovich grabbed the arm and yanked it in the disarmor, and Tessa Blanchard tapped out. Absolutely great finish. I love that finish. The match itself was really good. It was mostly Tessa. The story going into the match is, Tessa playing mind games with Masha Slamovich and, attacking Johnny Rides. I think it was verbally because Johnny Rides is 80 years old. And Johnny Rides, who was the trainer of Masha Slamovich, he also trained the Dudley Boys and, probably 100 other guys. A lot of the guys who ended up in ECW, like Tommy Dreamer and Taz, I think he's also had a hand in Raven, so I don't think this thing is over, but very, very well done match between these two. I really enjoy Masha Slamovich's performances. I think she's great. Santana versus Mustafa Ali. Falls count anywhere. Really good match. Mustafa Ali is finally starting to He's finally starting to fulfill that potential that we were talking about in WWE that everybody saw. I was kind of lukewarm on him in WWE, but I think he's really done a great job since he left, specifically in TNA where he's given time to do storylines and cut promos. And he's done a really good job here of mocking Santana for being an addict and then mocking other addicts and basically abusing them. He's been abusive to all the various addicts in the world, and so Santana's going to stand up for the addicts. which is a big old shrug for me, but these guys did a really good job. So Santana stood up some stairs. He stood the stairs up, and then Mustafa Ali tried a tope, and then Santana moved and directed Ali right into the stairs. It was like an incredible spot, and it looked like it hurt like hell. Then you had Mustafa Ali did a jump off the balcony onto Mike Santana while he was fighting with the good hands or the great hands or whatever. Mustafa Ali nails a coast to coast on the ring apron. Jesus Louise, that looked amazing. Whew. With the chair too, it looked great. Then Mustafa Ali did a 450 splash while Mike Santana was on a table. That was also only a 2 count. Santana ended up with some handcuffs, and he ended up handcuffing the good hands to the bottom rope just to eliminate them from the conversation. Tasha Steelz, who is now a part of Mustafa Ali's administration, she kept getting involved too. So Santana snatched her up and razor's edged her through a table. And this was a huge spot, which was ill, right? This was a crazy spot. Crowd went nuts for this. Mustafa Ali then retrieved a barbed wire baseball bat and hit Mike Santana in the head with it. Caused some bleeding. Santana was bleeding a little bit. And then he fired up as Mustafa Ali is ready to hit him with the bat again. He took it from him, nailed his spin the block lariat. 1, 2, 3. He wins the match. Really good match. The match of the night, without a shadow of a doubt. This was extremely good. And even if you're one of the guys who kind of on the fence about TNA, watch this show, specifically watch this match. This match is really good. Now, there is something to be said about some of the more devastating things they did in the match for the finish to be a discus lariat, but that's his finish, so it is what it is. Very good. TNA then announced that Indy Hartwell has signed a contract with them, which is a good signing for them, as Indy Hartwell is a decent pro wrestler. I always say she was like a deer on ice, and she's going to have to improve, and TNA is the right place for him, I guess. Can't say anything better than that. She's not really that much of a personality, but we'll see. And I think having a young women's division is good for TNA. You know, I think it's just as good for NWA, but bringing in the younger women, some people who have already washed out from WWE or some people who are trying to get there, is probably the right mix. The next match was Steve Maclin defeating Eric Young. This was one of these matches that was aggressively mid. I did not care about this because I don't care about Eric Young. As a matter of fact, I would dare to say I really, really, really don't like Eric Young. I don't see the point in him still being around. And especially operating and taking up spots on this roster, we should really be getting younger guys on the roster. Steve Maclin is just a guy to me. He's just there. He's just present. So the match was aggressively mid. I really didn't care. But Maclin wins. He won by countering Apollo Driver into a roll-up. After the match, Eric Young attacked Steve Maclin with a chain, and then he lynched him by choking him with the chain. These two were friends at one point, as Steve Maclin was going to war with the Northern Armory as it was being led by Josh Alexander before Josh Alexander's contract expired. And then as Josh Alexander's contract expired, Eric Young subsumed the leadership of the Northern Armory and sort of took over the feud from there. They've been going back and forth on being frenemies. And then Eric Young, he sort of drugged Steve Maclin's drink. I don't know to do what. I don't know, but he drugged him. He spiked his drink on TV, and so now they're going to continue this thing. I'm not looking forward to that because I'm not looking forward to more Eric Young. I can't. No. Don't care about that. All right. Next, the Rascals and Ace Austin defeated the System. I got to tell you, this was the second Moose match of the night. Very difficult time getting through this. But the crowd was very excited because X-Pac, Sean Waltman, came to the ring with the Rascals and Ace Austin. He gave Alicia Edwards an X Factor for slapping him, which of course got the crowd on their feet. They were all 100% down for that. There was Bronco Busters for everybody in the system before Zachary Wentz actually pinned Moose to win the match. So Moose, who was the X Division champion, just got pinned by a green-haired Zachary Wentz, which is likely going to be the direction they go in terms of who is he going to wrestle next. But the system is everything that's wrong with TNA. A bunch of guys who are, I think, past their expiration date, every single one of them, including Alicia. I think probably needs to go elsewhere. They look like this feels like an NWA act that's being dumped into TNA. Like Moose, Eddie Edwards, Brian Myers, they all need to just go away. Just go the fuck away. All right, next. The By Elegance brand, Ash and Heather By Elegance, defeated Chemical X, which is Gigi Dolan and Tatum Paxley. They defeated Spitfire, which is Jody Threat and Danny Luna. And they defeated the Meta Girls, which is Jakara Jackson and Lash Legend. This match was just okay. Jakara Jackson and Lash Legend did their old spot where Jakara jumps off of Lash's shoulders. I always liked that spot. They also did what I call the Meta Bomb, which is where Lash Legend picks the girls up sort of like a doomsday device, and then she kind of tosses them in the air so that Jakara Jackson could pull them down and sit out powerbomb. That was pretty cool. The finish came when Maggie Lee, who is being recruited by the By Elegance brand, actually helped Ash by grabbing her by the ankle to prevent her from being suplexed from the top rope. And while Jody Threat was down, Ash By Elegance landed a Swanton Bomb to win the match. It was solid. It wasn't great. Wasn't terrible. It was just solid. Wondering what you're going to do with the By Elegance brand now, because there's so many of these girls they've beaten already, and they've beaten pretty much all of these teams multiple times already. So it's probably time to send new NXT teams to the By Elegance brand in order to face them. But this is what TNA has been reduced to. Like, it's been the By Elegance brand and Spitfire for like 6 months, because they're the only two teams in the division. This is where, NXT can help them by supplementing their roster. The first match on the main show, the Ultimate X match. Moose versus Sidney Akeem versus Casey Navarro versus Matt Cardona versus Leon Slater versus El Hijo del Vikingo. This match was phenomenal. It was great. There was a whole lot of death-defying stuff in here. Of course, by now you've seen Leon Slater do a Swanton 450 off the top of the pillar, and nobody caught him. One person stuck their arm out, and their person almost lost that arm. Leon Slater ate the floor. One day these guys are going to realize, and this is happening a lot now, as jumps and dives are becoming more and more prevalent, there's fewer and fewer people being caught. Tiffany Stratton, was really suffering from that, as she would do these jumps and then people would try to come together, but they also don't know where those heels, the heel of her shoe was coming from. Her fingers are going to land, where her elbows are going. And so you kind of give her some space, and then bloop, she hits the floor. And you're like, ooh, that looked like it hurt. And so did this. Leon Slater ate floor from a very high position, because you had 5 other people, and actually more than 5, more like 7 other people, because AJ Francis was out there too, and nobody caught him. It was so dangerous. This is so horrible. It's so bad. One of the stories of the match is that Moose doesn't want to climb the pillar and the rope, so he tries to get the belt by using a chair, which was entertaining. He could have jumped from the chair and probably could have got it. Then he tried to coerce Alicia Edwards to climb up there and get it for him. She actually climbed up there, but then she couldn't make it across, and she fell down. Scripps was in this thing, Sidney Akeem, and he is just so impressive. I think he's becoming more confident on the indies because he's better now than when he was in NXT. And a lot of his agility, they really played into it a lot here, as they usually do. Casey Navarro was also very impressive. He tried to use AJ Francis as a centaur walked to the ring and attempt to have Casey Navarro snatch the X Division title, but Moose ended up spearing AJ Francis from underneath them. El Hijo del Vikingo hits a Canadian destroyer on Sidney Akeem on the ring apron. I'm using his names interchangeably. Scripps is Sidney Akeem. For people who don't know, it's the same person. He was called Scripps in NXT because he writes poetry, and that's like a legitimate thing. It's like a shoot thing. So the finish of this match, Leon Slater climbs the pillar, climbs across the ropes. He gets the title. He unhooks it. But that's not how you win. You have to actually bring the belt back to the ring. So for some odd reason, instead of just falling to the floor, and I mean, he already fell from a height and ate the whole damn floor, Leon Slater wanted to gingerly land on his feet. And the moment his feet touched the ring, Moose speared him. He dropped the title. Moose grabbed the belt and was considered the winner of the match. The crowd chanted bullshit. I 100% agree with them, but those are the rules, that you have to not only retrieve the belt, but safely return it to the ring, which I don't know if that has ever been the rules before for the Ultimate X, but hey, it's the rules now. I'm tired of Moose being the X Division champion, you know. I know some people actually like this guy. I've never been a Moose fan. I certainly have not been a Moose fan for like the past 4 or 5 years. Maybe there was a time in like 2016, 2017 where I think Moose was one of the better guys on the roster. But now I truly believe that he is one of the people standing in the way. When you see this match and you got Sidney Akeem in here and Leon Slater and Casey Navarro, and then you see later in the show where you got Ace Austin and Zachary Wentz and Trey McGill, you should be saying to yourself, that's the X Division, man. You know, Moose is not Samoa Joe, who is, you know, elevating the X Division by being the big guy who can go out there and work with them. I'm not really seeing that in him, but whatever. It is what it is. But it was very unfortunate. Okay. Now let's go into the pre-show, because I actually did watch the pre-show. Elijah defeated Shane Haste. Shane Haste, who spent a long time in WWE, had various different gimmicks. I think Paul Heyman actually liked Shane Haste at one point. But now he's doing the Mighty Don't Kneel over in New Japan. And this was one of the better Elijah/Elias matches I've seen. This was an open challenge, and Elijah won with a Tombstone Piledriver. The first match on the pre-show, Fatal Influence, that would be JC Jane, Jasmine Nix, and Fallon Henley. They defeated Rosemary, Xia Brookside, and Lei Ying Lee, who was Xia Lee in WWE. Now, they did the old babyface refuses to cheat gimmick, which is becoming way too prevalent in wrestling today. Rosemary wants to defeat Fatal Influence, so she gives Xia Brookside the brass knuckles and says, hey, use these brass knuckles. And Xia Brookside is like, no, I don't want to win that way. And she, of course, ends up losing. So now she looks like a full-blown dork. This is they've done this a lot lately. It's like sometimes bookers share one brain, you know, and this is the one brain cell that all the bookers are sharing, is that these baby faces are white meat baby faces who refuse to cheat. Even if the heel deserves it, they refuse to cheat. And they lost. So maybe Fatal Influence will move up, and Fatal Influence will be the next contenders for the By Elegance brand when it comes to the tag team championship. Seemed like that might be the decision, and it might be a good one. But ultimately, this was the entirety of the TNA pay-per-view event Rebellion. I have to say, it was actually a very, very good show. especially the top matches on the show. The preliminary stuff, well, the Ultimate X match absolutely is a watch. You should watch that. The next 2 or 3 matches are not necessarily stuff you need to see. You know, the 6-man tag is fun, but it's not necessary. Eric Young versus Steve Maclin, you can indeed skip that. But you probably should watch everything after Steve Maclin versus Eric Young, and you will enjoy this product tremendously. This is the best TNA show in ages. And outside of my usual complaints about TNA's very less than stellar roster, I still enjoyed the show because I understood the storylines, because I followed the storylines, and the work was very well done. So, and plus they did a good mix of singles matches and stipulations, and the stipulations made sense and actually fit the matches. The only problem I would have had is I probably would have not had Moose wrestle twice. It's just me. But let me know what you guys think of TNA Rebellion. Like, share, subscribe. I'll talk to you guys later. Peace out.